Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. So inshallah we will be continuing the Seerah from where we ended last time. And just to announce that this will be our second last session. So inshallah next Saturday will be our final session, inshallah. So previously we discussed the Battle of the Trench, or the Battle of the Confederates, the Battle of Al-Aqsa, and how the enemies of Islam, namely three big groups, so Quraysh, the Jews of Khaybar, and the Bedouin tribe of Ghatafan, all three of these allied with one another to try to take down the Muslims once and for all, in their own base, in their own city. They gathered 10,000 men to siege the city of Medina. We talked about the details of what happened, how the trench was built, how the city was defended, and how the tribe of Qurayza within the city of Medina, the final Jewish tribe, even in the most dire situation when the Muslims were surrounded, when the city of Medina was surrounded by the enemies of Islam, and in that situation they betrayed the covenant, they betrayed the treaty that they had with the Muslims, and now the Muslims were fighting on all fronts. Eventually, by the will of Allah, the Muslims, they prevailed. A great sandstorm came, and it completely nullified the armies of the enemies. And they were forced to go back home with nothing to show. The Prophet ﷺ, he dealt with the tribe of Ghatafan, and he allowed Sa'd ibn Mu'adh to make the judgment for them. And of course, the judgment that he made was to have all the able-bodied men executed for treason, for breaking the covenant, for trying to kill women and children, and for trying to kill the Prophet ﷺ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was pleased with this, and shortly after Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, he died as a martyr from the wound that he had received. And in narration of his death, the Prophet ﷺ said that when he was martyred, the throne of Allah shook. That was the level of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. And thousands of angels, they attended his funeral. And when they were lifting his body was light. They could not even feel any weight because angels had their hands on the body while they were lifting up that body. That was the level of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. Now, the enemies of Islam are once again completely humiliated. They tried to bring 10,000 men to siege the city of Medina, and they completely failed. So the Muslims now have the upper hand once again. More minor skirmishes happened in the outskirts of Medina, where the Prophet ﷺ sent expeditions and missions to pacify any of the raiding groups. Slowly, the influence of Islam and this influence of Medina was increasing more and more. Allies were growing, but there were still some desert raiders and desert Bedouins and polytheists who were making life hard for the Muslims as the Prophet ﷺ was trying to expand. So they were pacified. And then finally we get to a very important moment. Just to recap the timeline. So the Prophet ﷺ emigrated in the 13th year of prophethood. In the 2nd year of Hijrah, after the emigration, the Battle of Badr happened. In the 3rd year of Hijrah, the Battle of Uhud happened. In the 4th year of Hijrah, the 2nd Battle of Badr happened. In the 5th year of Hijrah, the Battle of the Trench that we just talked about happened. And now we're into the 6th year of the Hijrah. And here we are going to talk about the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah. So one day the Prophet ﷺ, he receives a dream, and he sees himself in the dream performing tawaf around the Kaaba. And of course the dreams of prophets are reality. They either have some message, revelation given to them, or a premonition of what is to come. When he sees this dream, he realizes that it is basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showing him that he will perform Umrah. So him and his companions will perform Umrah. So he announces the intention to perform Umrah, and 1,400 to 1,500 men from the Muslims prepare. The Muslims, the Muhajirin and the Ansar from within the city of Medina, they prepare and they say we will perform Umrah. But some of the Bedouins outside of Medina who had converted, who had accepted Islam, they made excuses and they said, no, we're not going to come. We have other things to take care of. The Prophet ﷺ waited until the month of Dhul-Qa'dah to set out on this journey. And the reason he set out for the journey in this month was this was one of the 4 sacred months. Even the Arabs, they would give respect to these months that there is to be no bloodshed. There is no bloodshed, no fighting in these months. And of course, for us, this stands as well. And this was from the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam that remained within the Arabs despite their polytheism. So, in a general sense, they would respect the sanctity of these months, these sacred months. So the Prophet ﷺ, his goal was to perform Umrah, not to fight. He was not about to go to Mecca to fight the enemies of Islam. He was going so that he could just perform Umrah. So the animals are prepared for sacrifice. Whenever Umrah was done, many Muslims, and even today, sacrificial animals are set forth, and the Prophet ﷺ set forth 70 camels to be sacrificed and to be given to the poor. They start making their way outside of the city of Medina. They reach a certain point, and now they put on their ihram, and they also they decorate the animals. This is actually now a sunnah that is not followed very much, but it's from the sunnah that whatever animals are designated to be sacrificed, it is a sunnah to beautify them, to put flowers on them and to decorate them, to make them look very beautiful, to signify that these are sacrificial animals and they are going to be sacrificed when we perform Umrah. So they make their journey, and as they near the city of Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ, he sends forth a scout to look at the reaction of Quraysh. How are they going to react to us coming? And of course, when 1,400 to 1,500 men are marching through, this is not a secret, they can see this. When the scout goes and he sees the Kuffar of Quraysh preparing, he sees that they are getting on battle armor. They're getting leopard skins ready, they're getting their swords ready, they're getting their shields ready. And they are prepared to fight. They are prepared to fight. And he comes back and he gives this news to the Prophet ﷺ. And this saddens the Prophet ﷺ very much. He says, can they see that I'm coming from Umrah? I'm coming in a peaceful manner. And why do my brothers, why do my kinsmen keep on doing this to me? Why do they keep on fighting me? Don't they understand that even if they were neutral, if they left me alone to deal with the other Arabs, it's a win-win situation for them. If they kill me, they win. They'll be rid of me. And if I defeat them, only their honor will increase, because the Prophet ﷺ, he himself is from the tribe of Quraysh. He himself is a Qurayshi. So he's saying, what is the purpose of fighting me over and over again? So this saddens the Prophet ﷺ a lot. And this is also a takeaway that we get from this. The Prophet ﷺ, even within the deen of Islam, Muslims fight out of necessity. Muslims don't go out seeking to fight. They do not like to fight. The Sahaba, the Prophet ﷺ, always their first approach was diplomacy, was to talk things through, give the message peacefully, negotiate with the enemies, make sure things go through in a peaceful manner. As we're going to discuss, the Prophet ﷺ sent out letters to different kings and different rulers. He didn't just show up to their lands with armies. It was the way of the Muslims and the way of the Prophet ﷺ to always go through the peaceful means first. Go through peace. Peace is the first option. But at the same time, Muslims are not pushovers. So if Muslims are attacked by the enemies, if Muslims are persecuted, if Muslims are harmed and they are not allowed to follow their religion perfectly as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained, then the sword must be picked up. So the Prophet said, I have come for peace. And then he consults with the Sahaba and he asks them, what should we do? And Abu Bakr, he gives advice. He says, we have come out in a peaceful manner and we want to perform Umrah. Let's go out in this manner. We trust Allah, and if they fight us, we will fight them. We will fight back. But the Prophet liked this idea. He said, okay, we will go forward. So the army of the Muslims, or the group of the Muslims, they keep going forward, and they come to find out that the main road towards Mecca is blocked. A cavalry led by Khalid bin Walid has blocked this way. So they are forced to divert from the path and go from a different path. And the different path was very difficult for them to walk upon. It was a very rocky formation with lots of thorns and lots of debris on it. And it was so bad that the feet of the Sahaba started to bleed because of this path that they took. But the Prophet ﷺ, when he got revelation, and he was told that anybody sincerely who walks through this path, all of his previous sins will be forgiven. So this motivated the Sahaba, this motivated them, and they continued. Then, as they're going, the Prophet ﷺ's camel, Al-Aswad, she stops. She just stops moving, and she stops at a place called Hudaybiyyah. And she sits down, and the Prophet ﷺ tries to make her move, and the Sahaba starts yelling at the camel as well, like, start moving. And they say to the camel, they say about the camel that she has become stubborn. She won't obey anymore. And subhanAllah, look at the honor of the Prophet ﷺ and how much he used to defend the honor of others. He said, no, it is not within her nature to be stubborn. She was stopped by the same creator who stopped the elephants that were allowed to attack the Kaaba years ago. So this is the wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused my camel to stop. So we're going to stop here. And at the same time, look how much he honored those creations around him. That he's even defending the honor of his camel. He's saying, no, she's not a stubborn camel. I know how she is. So he wouldn't even accept anything like that to be said about his camel. So they stop there, and they set up camp, and they find a well to get water from. And at this point, because they had to divert from their main path, they're now running out of food and water. The provisions that they had in mind, there aren't enough. So they go into the well, and they see there's only a little bit of, there's little splashes of water within this. The Prophet ﷺ, in some narrations, he either spits inside the well, or he brings up the bucket, he puts an arrow inside the well, and when the bucket is put back within the well, water starts gushing out like a flood from this well. And through this miracle, all 1,400 to 1,500 of the Sahaba are able to make wudu, they're able to satiate themselves with their water, they're able to quench their thirst, and this is a miracle that they saw. Now, as they're camping, Quraysh actually sent a surprise attack to attack the Muslims. Just in there, because they see that they're in a vulnerable state, so they were trying to do a hit and run on the Muslims. But the scouts saw them, and the Muslims actually encircled these men that were about to attack the Muslims, and there were about 80 to 100 of these men. And subhanAllah, look at the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ, and just wanting to show and signify that we are here for peaceful means, he lets every single one of them go. Not a single one of them is executed, he lets them go. Because he's trying to show a gesture to them. We're not here to fight. Why do you keep trying to fight us? Now, when this group of Quraysh come back, now the leaders of Quraysh, they realize, okay, now let's at least talk to them. Let's start discussing with them. So here, the negotiations begin. Firstly, a third-party member is sent. He is from one of the neighboring tribes of Mecca. So he is sent to discuss with the Prophet ﷺ, why you're here, what are you doing? So the Prophet ﷺ tells him clearly, we are simply here to perform the law. We do not want any bloodshed. We are not here to attack the city. We are not here for any of these things. Let us perform Umrah. We will perform the Umrah and we will go back to Medina. He comes back and he tells Quraysh that this is what they want. All they say is that they want to perform Umrah. But at the same time, the Prophet ﷺ did not back down either. He said, if you attack us, if you want to fight, we are ready to fight. But our intention is not to fight. We are here to just to perform Umrah. Then they sent another delegation. So Quraysh, they sent a man named Urwa, who was from the city of Taif. He goes and he starts talking to the Muslims, again asking them what they want, what their conditions are, how are they going to perform Umrah, are we going to trust you, these kind of things. The Prophet ﷺ tells him the same thing that he told the other emissary, and he starts calling, Urwa starts calling the Muslims aggressors. That how can you claim to want peace when you're coming in here carrying swords? So he's trying to twist the Prophet's words and make him seem to be the aggressor. Another thing that happens, as he's talking to the Prophet ﷺ, he tries to use mind games with him and with the Sahaba, and he starts mocking the followers of the Prophet ﷺ. Now understand this situation of Muslims is unique to Arabia. This is the most unique situation in Arabian history. Never before have men from different tribes from all over Arabia come together for a single cause, united under a single banner of Islam. Before this, your tribe was everything. That's all that mattered. your tribe and the allies of your tribe. That's all that matters. So, in the minds of the Arabs at that time, the non-believers, it was impossible in their mind to trust somebody that was not from your tribe. So he mocks the Muslims and he says, what is this hodgepodge group of men that you have gathered around you? Don't you see them? They're going to betray you. He basically starts mocking the Sahaba and he accuses them of betraying the Prophet. Listening to this, one Sahabi who was sitting in the corner of the tent, he lets out a very vile and straightforward curse. He curses the female idol that Urwa used to worship. So, Al-Uzza, he curses this idol. And it's actually a disgusting curse that he says, because he was so angry. And Urwa, astonished at this curse, did I just hear this? And he said, who said that? And Abu Bakr comes forward, he said, I said this. That insult, when he said that your companion will abandon you, it insulted Abu Bakr so much. The same Abu Bakr who is calm and collected and wise and has a very good demeanor, it upset him so much that he let a curse out from his mouth. And of course, the Muslims, even as Muslims, we are not allowed to curse the false idols of the non-believers. Because if we start cursing their non-believers, then they're going to start cursing our true religion. So this is actually incorrect to him. But in his emotion, he just let that out. Couldn't control it. Urwa said that if I had not owed you a favor, I would have said something back to you as well. Another thing happens. Urwa, when he is negotiating with the Prophet, this was from the tradition of the Arabs, that whenever they're trying to plead to each other or trying to negotiate with each other, they grab each other's beards. So he kept on putting his hand out, trying to grab the beard of the Prophet, saying, just listen to me, just listen to me. He would put out his hand, and someone from behind the Prophet would get his sword scabbard and hit it on his hand. And then he would put his hand back. And then he would, next time when the negotiation would get a little more intense, he would try to grab the beard of the Prophet, the scabbard would come back and hit him on his hand again. And each time it got harder and harder and harder. Finally, one time he tried to do it once more, and he said, reach out your hand once again and I'll chop your hand off. And he said, who said this? How dare you say this? His own grandnephew, his brother's grandson, was behind the Prophet ﷺ, defending the Prophet ﷺ and saying, don't touch him. So this is what Islam had done. That their tribalism, their blood did not matter anymore. All that mattered was Allah and His Messenger and the deen that was revealed to the Muslims. This astonished Allah. He did not believe the state of the Muslims. At this point, he returns to Quraysh and his mind is completely changed. He actually describes what he saw from the Sahaba. This is a man now, he went in with a different mindset and he comes back with a different mindset. He tells the Quraysh, he says, by Allah, I have been to the palace of the Roman Emperor, to the palace of the Persian Emperor, to the king of Abyssinia's court. In my life, I have never seen a group of men treat their leader with respect the way the Sahaba of Muhammad treat him. When he would spit, when the Prophet would spit, they would dive and compete with each other to catch his spit and rub it on their face and their bodies to receive the barakah. And every time he would make wudu, they would put their hands beneath to collect the water drops and clean themselves with that. All he would have to do, the Prophet said that all he would have to do was look at something and they would rush to try to obey the Prophet. And finally he said they had so much respect for the Prophet that I did not see a single one of his companions look directly in his eyes. Like when the Prophet would be sitting, they would not meet eyes with the Prophet directly out of respect. They would look like this. They would look at the body of the Prophet, the beard of the Prophet, but they would not lock eyes with him out of extreme respect. This episode completely shook Urwa to his core. And he actually switched sides. He now started pleading on the side of the Muslims. And he said to Quraysh, just let them perform Umrah. Just let them perform Umrah. I'm giving you my word, they're not going to attack you. They're not going to attack you. Let them perform Umrah and go. Of course, Quraysh, the way they are, they start cursing him and they say, we don't need you at all. Then they sent another emissary, and seeing the animals that were set up for the sacrifice, that affected him. And he said, like without a doubt, they're here just to perform Umrah. Look at the sacrificial animals. He comes back and he says that, okay, let them perform Umrah. Both emissaries that they have now sent are coming back saying, why are you trying to fight them? Let them perform Umrah. Let them keep on doing this. Eventually, the Prophet ﷺ, he sends a Sahabi to negotiate with them. And he was a Sahabi who was neither from the Ansar and he was neither from the Muhajirin. So he sent a neutral party. So he sends him on his own camel, on a different camel, not Aswad. And he goes in, and Quraysh, they start instigating, and to the point that they actually start slashing the camel's legs. And one of the other elders from Quraysh, they say, why are you trying to kill the emissary? Don't do this, don't kill the emissary. He picks him up and he says, go back, go back. So with this, the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims, they realize that they do not want to negotiate with anybody. They want to negotiate with somebody of nobility, especially from Quraysh. So the Prophet ﷺ, he starts talking with the Sahaba, who should we send? Who should we send as an emissary on our behalf to talk to them? At first he says Umar radiallahu anhu, he says he will go. And we all know the temper of Umar and the ghayra that he has over the deen, and he does not tolerate disrespect. So him acknowledging this within himself, he acknowledges his own temper, he acknowledges his own emotional way. So he actually advises the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ya Rasulullah, if you command me, I will go, I have no problem with this. But you know of my animosity with Quraysh, and you know of my animosity with Abu Sufyan. And I feel that tempers might flare and things might get bad between us. So I recommend that you send Uthman. Send him. He is of a very noble birth. He is a relative of Abu Sufyan, and he will be able to convince them better than I can. And in this process, he said, I agree with your decision making, and he chooses Uthman to go as an emissary to talk to Quraysh. So now Uthman is sent, and as they had thought, he was welcomed by Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan's father and Uthman's father were, Abu Sufyan and Uthman's father were first cousins. So they were first cousins once removed. The Prophet ﷺ also told Uthman to check on the Muslims within Mecca. So at this point, most of the Muslims had made hijrah to Medina, but some of them were held as captives within the city of Mecca. So the Prophet ﷺ told them that when you go inside Mecca, at least look at them, see what their condition is, see at least they're being fed and they're alive, what's happening to them. So he sees them, and then they start the negotiations. And at this point, Quraysh are actually holding Uthman as kind of like a hostage. They're delaying. They keep on negotiating over and over and over again. And now hours have passed. Hours have passed since Uthman was sent as an emissary. And at this point, a rumor starts to spread that they have killed him. Like if it's been this many hours and he's not back, without a doubt they must have killed him. And this rumor spreads farther and farther and farther. And the Prophet ﷺ, hearing this, it upsets him. And he's like, how could they do this? How could they kill a messenger? How could they kill an emissary? Even in the days of Jahiliyyah. This is something that you do not do. If someone is sent for negotiating, if somebody is sent with a letter, you do not kill him. So, hearing this, the Prophet ﷺ, he sits under a tree and he invites all the Muslims. And he says to them, I ask you for a pledge now. You are going to pledge to me. If it is true that they have killed Uthman, we will make a pledge right here under this tree that we will give up our blood, we will give up our lives until we have avenged Uthman. There is no way we can let this slide. We cannot let an emissary come in peace be killed for no reason. So, one by one, they all the Sahaba, they put their hands under the Prophet's hand, and the Prophet takes the pledge of allegiance from them, pledging that yes, they will give their lives. And at the end, he takes his own left hand and his right hand, and he says, this is for Uthman. He pledges on behalf of Uthman, knowing that he would have made the pledge. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives this group of Muslims. This was a test for them. This was actually a test for them, to see who is the true believer. When we categorize the Muslims in terms of their level of greatness,
The greatest Muslims to ever live as a group were the Ashraf al-Bashar, the 10 promised Jannah. After them, the greatest group of Muslims to ever live were the participants of the Battle of Badr. And after the Battle of Badr, the greatest participant, the greatest group of Muslims to ever live were those at the Bay'at al-Ridwan. This was called the Bay'at al-Ridwan. The ones who participated sincerely in this pledge, they are amongst the greatest Muslims to ever live. Once this pledge is made, Quraysh, they get news of this and they actually realize that now the Muslims are getting ready for battle. Hearing this, they immediately release Uthman. They put him on his camel and they say, go back. And they actually realize now, the Muslims, that he was alive all this time. But the wisdom of this pledge, again, this was a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gifted them this to test them how high their iman is, and every single one who pledged, all of their previous sins were forgiven. Now at this point, when Uthman is finally released, an official delegation from Quraysh is sent. Now they're done playing games. They send one of their old leaders. His name was Suhail ibn Amr. They sent him as an official delegation to start negotiating with the Muslims to discuss the terms and the situation and what's going to happen. He comes and he starts putting forth condition after condition after condition, like one-sided conditions, that, oh, the Muslims are going to do this, they're going to do this, they're going to do this, one-sided condition. And because the Prophet ﷺ's goal was peace, he did not come here to fight. All he wanted to do was perform Umrah. He told the Sahaba, any condition they give me, as long as it is within the limits of Islam, as long as it's within the limits of the Sharia, I will accept it. I'm going to accept it. So what were some of the conditions? First and foremost, he said, you will not perform Umrah this year. So after days of journey through the desert, he tells them, you will not perform Umrah, next year you can come. Another condition was, next year when you perform the Umrah, Quraysh will empty the city and you will have only 3 days. Within 3 days, as many Muslims can perform Umrah, they can do it, but then you have to leave. Now, this is where one of the one-sided conditions begin. They say, no man from Quraysh can go to Medina, whether he is a Muslim, whether he is a non-Muslim. So, if some man from Quraysh, after the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah, he accepts Islam and he wants to perform Hijrah, he is not allowed to stay within the city of Medina. This is a one-sided thing. It's one-sided because there's another stipulation. If someone from the Muslim side deserts and he decides to come back to Mecca and join the Quraysh, they are allowed to stay in Mecca. So, on one hand, a Muslim emigrating to Medina is not allowed to stay in Medina anymore, but someone deserting and coming back to Mecca, he's allowed to stay in Mecca. Another stipulation was, which benefited both sides, was no fighting for 10 years. A strict peace treaty for 10 years. No fighting between the Muslims and Quraysh. And the final stipulation was, both sides can add allies to these stipulations. So for example, after this treaty has been done, if another tribe wants to join the Muslims, they can join. But these exact stipulations must apply to them as well. As this is being done, subhanAllah, as a test for the Muslims, they are tested right there and right then and there. The son of Suhail, he was a Muslim, and in fact he had been chained in a cellar of Mecca for 4 years. His own father, Suhail, was torturing him, making him give up his religion, but he did not want to give up his religion. And this whole time he was thinking, how can I escape? How can I escape? Because even if he escapes, they're going to come after him and they're going to find him. So this whole time, for 4 years, he's waiting for an opportunity to find a way to escape. He receives a rumor. Obviously, he hears the chatter outside, and he hears that the Muslims have come and they're camped outside of Mecca. SubhanAllah, what a scene it must have been. As the Prophet and Suhail are talking about the terms and conditions, he escapes his prison and he shows up to the tent where the negotiations are being done. And they show him, like, he has his chains on him, he is still chained. And now he said, my brother, you have come to save me. You have come to say, Muslims, you have come to say, I can join you now. But go back to one of the conditions. Now, with this condition, a Muslim in Mecca, he is not allowed to go to Medina anymore. So, Suhail said, this condition, the first person to be applied is my son, Abu Jandal. He's going to be applied upon this. Tell him to go back to Mecca right now. He is not going to Medina. And in this moment, the Prophet ﷺ, he tries to negotiate as hard as he said, just let him come. Just let him come. After this, we'll put this stipulation. Just let him come with us. Just let him come with us. Suhail said, no, there's no way. There's no way. They come to a standstill. Suhail said, there's no way I'm going to let him go. The Prophet said, there's no way I'm going to let him go in this condition. So one of the people on the side of Quraysh, he actually said, okay, we'll give you a guarantee that he is not going to be tortured anymore. He's not going to be harmed anymore, but he will stay in Mecca. SubhanAllah, reluctantly in this situation, the Prophet ﷺ agrees to this term, and a Muslim has to be left behind. But of course, this was from the judgment of the Prophet ﷺ, that he is doing everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed him to do. As a leader, he is allowed to negotiate. He is allowed to do whatever he thinks is best for the Ummah. So now the treaty is being put into writing. As they're putting it into writing, Suhail ibn Amr, he objects over and over again. He said, oh, why are you saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? Why are you putting this? Why are you doing this? And at the end, he writes, the Prophet ﷺ tells Ali to write. Ali is the one who's writing the treaty. He tells him to write at the end, signed by Muhammad Rasulullah. Muhammad Rasulullah. And Suhail says, I don't believe you're Rasulullah. Cut this off. Cut this part off. You're going to scribble this part off. Just why don't you just follow our tradition and say Muhammad ibn Yaqub? The Prophet ﷺ says, okay, whatever. If you believe, you want to be Muslim, so just cut it off. He tells Ali, cut it off. But this was the honor of Ali radiallahu anhu. He did not want to understand this. He's not disobeying the Prophet. But in his honor, he is reluctant. He said, no, you are the messenger. You are the messenger. I am not going to scribble this off. I'm not going to scribble this off the piece of the paper. And of course, he's not doing this out of disrespect to the Prophet. The Sahaba love to obey the Prophet. But in his heart, he feels, this is something, I can't do this. So the Prophet himself, he took the treaty and he scribbled his own name off. Now when this is done, Suhail, he goes back happy. He says, okay, we did whatever we wanted to do. But some of the Sahaba, they're speechless. They're saying, how is this done? And Umar, of course, we understand he's very emotional. And he's emotional in a good way. He's emotional in honor of Islam. He's not trying to disrespect the Prophet. He's not trying to disrespect his judgment. But he keeps questioning. He says, are you not the messenger of Allah? Are we not upon the truth? Why are we accepting terms like this? And the Prophet tells him, I am the messenger of Allah. We are upon the truth, and we trust Allah. We will trust Allah with what has been done here. And he keeps on, he's unhappy with the situation, because in his mind, he thinks that the enemies of Islam that now have the upper hand. They've had the upper hand now. At this point, Abu Bakr goes up to him and he says, Ya Rajul, oh man, calm down. Calm down. Unless you want to be doomed. So stop questioning the Prophet. At this point, he realizes that, yeah, he's making a mistake. The Prophet orders the Sahaba to shave their heads because they came to Umrah, so as a sign that they at least had the intention, they start shaving their heads and they set on a journey back. Umar, he realizing his mistake, he comes up to the Prophet while he's leading the army. He comes up to the Prophet and he starts apologizing. He says, Ya Rasulullah, forgive me for questioning your judgment. I did not mean to question you. I did not mean to disrespect you. I hope you can forgive me. But he's met with silence. The Prophet was not replying to him. He asked him again, and he's still not replying to him. And subhanAllah, at this point, he just starts sulking in depression. He says, I ruined myself. I ruined myself. Made the mother of Umar ibn Khattab start crying and weeping over her son because he is ruined. He's a dead man. And as he starts sulking and he comes to the middle of the army now, and again, he actually receives a message from the Prophet that the Prophet is asking you to come. And that scares him even more. He says, okay, I'm back. There's no chance of me surviving this. He comes up to the Prophet and the Prophet's face is beaming with light. And he's beaming with happiness. And he reveals the entire, at that moment, the reason he had not replied to Umar was because he was receiving revelation. and he received the entire Surah Al-Fatih. And in it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Muslims that indeed you have a clear victory. You are victorious. Hearing this, Umar ibn al-Khattab said, are we truly victorious? Like, yes, you are victorious. The entire Muslim caravan starts celebrating. They start celebrating. Even just moments ago, they were all silent and they're like, okay, we're going to trust the Prophet, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But as soon as they hear the words of Allah, as soon as they hear the revelation, they start beaming with happiness. They realize that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed that this is a victory, then indeed, this is a very, very clear victory. And this was the power of revelation. And this was the level of admiration that the Sahaba had for the Quran, had for the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because, of course, they respect the Prophet, but the kalam of Allah, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unmatched. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals something, that's when it really instills within their hearts. So at this point, the Muslims, they go back to the city of Medina, and they take this as a victory, despite the one-sided stipulation set upon them. At this point, the Prophet ﷺ, knowing that one of his main enemies has been taken care of, not through fighting, but through diplomacy. His main three enemies were the tribes of Ghatafan, the Bedouin tribe of Ghatafan, the Quraysh, and the Jews of Khaybar. So one of them had been taken care of. Seeing that they've been taken care of, the Prophet ﷺ, now he starts sending out emissaries and letters to the different kings of the area. His main enemy of Quraysh has been subdued at least for 10 years in their mind. 10-year peace treaty, no fighting. So he starts giving out letters. One letter he sends to the king, the emperor of Persia. And in it, he begins with the name of Allah, and he says from Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, to Kisra, the king of Persia. And in it, he invites the emperor of Persia to Islam. He tells him, accept Islam. Otherwise, if you do not accept, and if you lead your men towards this dreadful path, you will be responsible of the sins of the Majus, the sins of the Magians, the sins of the Zoroastrians. Seeing this letter read out to him, the arrogance of the Persian emperor, he takes the letter and he rips it to shreds, and he says, how dare he put his name before me? He's talking about the Prophet Muhammad. How dare he put his name before me? And when the Prophet receives word of this, he says, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tear apart his entire kingdom the way he tore apart my letter. And subhanAllah, exactly as the Prophet made the dua, years later, a few years later, his entire empire crumbled. On the other hand, the emperor of Rome, Heraclius, he is sent the same type of letter, and he is invited to accept Islam. Now, because he was Christian, they had this concept of prophets. And it just happened at the same time Abu Sufyan was present within the city of the Romans. And he found out that a man of Quraysh is within the city. So he said, call him. So Abu Sufyan came, and the letter was read out to him on both sides. And he starts asking Abu Sufyan questions. And he asks him the question basically, what is the nobility of, what's the nobility of the Prophet? What are his followers? What is his character? Was one of his previous ancestors king? He asked him a series of questions. And he had told the companions of Abu Sufyan behind him, he said, you sit behind him, every time he tells me a lie, put your head up. Put your head up every time he tells a lie. And Abu Sufyan recounts himself, he said, if it was not for my own honor, if it was not that I was scared that they would call me a liar, I would have lied every single time. Every answer that he gives, it satisfies the emperor. It satisfies the emperor Heraclius. And he says, indeed, the signs that you are showing me, these are of a true prophet. And subhanAllah, at the end he says, I wish I could see him, I would wash his feet. I would wash his feet. The emperor of the Romans is saying this. But as Abu Sufyan himself recounts, he said, but it was by the will of Allah, and I accepted Islam and he did not. What was the problem with Emperor Heraclius? He knew the signs were clear. He could not give up the dunya. He could not give up his kingship. He was one of the emperors of the greatest, biggest empires on earth. as a human being, as a man, and because of his pride and his prestige, he could not give that up. So he never formally acknowledged Islam. But still, because of his good behavior, the Prophet ﷺ made dua for him. Similarly, the Prophet ﷺ sent letters to the king of Abyssinia, the king of Egypt, all the different leaders of the surrounding nations. And of course, now Islam is growing more and more and more and more. And as we will see, as we will conclude in next week's session, one of the greatest victories ever given is given to the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims as a reward for their perseverance, as a reward for years and years and years of patience, and as a reward to the Muslims for obeying their Lord, obeying the Messenger, not questioning him, and showing their loyalty, their utmost loyalty. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He rewards them with the conquest of Mecca. Years of persecution later, the Muslims enter the sea victorious. And we will, inshallah, discuss the details in depth next week's session. But we will conclude here for now. And just as an announcement, next week's session on Saturday will be the final session, inshallah. So if anybody has any questions, please let me know. Yes. The name of the, so the question was, what was the name of the grandson who was going to chop off the arm? I actually do not know the name. Yeah, I'm not sure about the name. Yeah. But I'll check for you. Yes.
That person who kept grabbing the Prophet ﷺ's beard, did he ever become Muslim?
He did actually. Yes. Yeah. The question was, did Urwa, the person who was grabbing the Prophet ﷺ's beard, did he ever become Muslim? In fact, he did. And he was one of the first Muslims of Taif. And we talked about the people of Taif. They had a high level of animosity towards the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims. And he was warned by the Prophet ﷺ, be careful with your people. I have dealt with your people before. I have dealt with them. I know how they are. Be careful of, it's good to be proud that you're a Muslim, but be careful with them. Be cautious of them. And Urwa, subhanAllah, he got to a point of taqwa and iman that he used to stand on top of his roof and pray out loud in front of all the people of life, showing that, yes, I'm a Muslim. I'm not afraid of you. And subhanAllah, one of these nights, as he was praying, one of the people of life shot an arrow at him, and he fell off his house and down a cliff, and he was shaheed that way. So that was the end of the war. It completely changed his life when he met the Prophet ﷺ in person. He saw how the companions treated him.
I had another question. Why didn't they send Abu Bakr instead of? Is it because he wasn't like nobility? Or?
Yeah. So the question was, why did the Muslims, why the Prophet ﷺ sent Uthman instead of Abu Bakr? Yes, it was because of the nobility. In terms of the relationship, Abu Sufyan was now one of the highest leaders of Quraysh, and his closest relative was Uthman. He was his first cousin, a very, very close relation. So in their mind, they thought this was the best diplomatic thing to do, to send a close relative of Abu Sufyan. Was there another question? No? Unfortunately, I don't have contact with the sister's side, so won't be able to take questions. Okay, so inshallah we'll end here for today, and inshallah next week's session will be our final. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. والعصر ان الانسان لفي خسر الا الذين امنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Yes, Lucy, you have a question?
Yeah, why did he trying to cut the camel's leg off?
Because so the question was, why did the Quraysh, when they saw the emissary from the Muslims, when he was coming into the city of Mecca to negotiate with them, why did they try to cut the camel's leg off? This was a sign of hatred towards the Muslims. They wanted to show their animosity towards the Muslims. They wanted to show them that we don't want to talk to you. You are our enemies. So to avoid killing the person, they started harming the camel. So that's why they did that. Does that make sense?